Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I just finished the show last night, so by the time you guys see this, it's probably like a week old. Who knows how long it'll take me before I actually end up recording some random footage for this? But I love the show. I thought it was great. Like going through, first off, I love the fact that they finished the show within a month. It was like, here's episodes 1 and 2, and then it was like, boom, three episodes, and then episodes 9 and 10 were together. So I think it's great. I think considering the praise the show is getting, minus, the hatred it's getting for other idiotic reasons, but outside of that, I think the praise it's getting is probably going to end up changing the release schedule for the next season. I think they might do, maybe they'll only do like 2 at a time instead of doing 3 episodes at a time, but I would love it if they kept the schedule. I just don't know if, they'll be like, hey, we can kind of string people along. They never release anything within the span of a month, Like, it's always going to end up being, hey, we want to spread this out so we can get as much money as possible. Granted, it ended in the middle of February, so odds are, depending on how people did it, I'm sure there are a lot of people who still had to pay because they were in the middle of a month. But most of the time, it's like, hey, we want as much money as possible. They had 10 episodes. They could have stretched this out over 2.5 months, but they didn't. I don't know if that's because of the era that they're in right now as far as Marvel not really being trusted and all that good stuff. But either way, this was amazing. I love this show. I thought it was really good. It's already up there. Like, honestly, episodes 3, 4, and 5 were the ones where I was like, oh, this is on Spectacular Spider-Man level. 100%. It's up there. It's, as far as I'm concerned, my big 3 are the 90s Spider-Man Spectacular and now this. And that's, like almost half the Spider-Man shows. But this was definitely great. Like, the way they did the characters and the storytelling was super well done. Honestly, and there will be spoilers in this because I'm obviously discussing the whole season, but non-spoiler wise, I highly recommend the show. If you were like, I don't know about the animation and stuff, it looks great. I actually think it looks amazing. I always thought it looked pretty cool in general, and I was like, I like that idea of it, and having Peter look like kind of the 50s style version of himself, but a little bit more modern. I already thought that was interesting, and then like when that first trailer came out, I was like, I think this looks really good. And then actually watching the show, it's even better. It's like, this is amazing. Like, this, if this happens to inspire other shows to look like this, like how Spider-Verse did for a lot of movies and stuff like that, I'll be perfectly happy with it, because I actually really love this idea of it's fully 3D, but it has the 2D look to it, and I thought that was great. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know if, it was funny watching this, and especially like finally ending the show, I was like, man, it's been a minute, as far as I've seen at least, since we've had like a fully CG anime. Like, it's been a little minute since they've really dived into that. It's normally, they kind of gone away from that and gone back to just 2D with 3D elements. And I'm not current on all anime, so maybe there's a fully 3D anime that's actually out there right now. But this was like, they could do 3D anime, and it totally works, because this looks really good for it being in 3D. It doesn't have that weird back and forth where it's like, you can tell it's 3D, but the way they do it with the shading and the flatness, is the best way I can think to describe it. I think it looks really, really good. So I highly recommend it, not just because it looks great, but the story of it I think is really well done too, especially considering this was supposed to be the origin story for Spider-Man in the MCU. It was initially called Spider-Man Freshman Year, and it was going to be Tom Holland's Spider-Man as he first went through high school. And I'm super happy that changed, because there's no way this show would have been as good. Like, no offense to anything that they could have had written for the origin of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but you know what they wouldn't have had? They wouldn't have had Scorpion. They wouldn't have had Doc Ock, that's for sure. I highly doubt they would have used Tombstone. Like, I don't know what they would have done to have used these characters. Obviously, they wouldn't have had Nico in it, and Norman Osborn. Like, there's so many things that just would not exist in the show that I'm like, it literally would have been a completely different series. Like, there are so many characters where it's like, yeah, obviously that character doesn't exist, because the whole point of Spider-Man No Way Home is that there was no Norman Osborn. It's like, what's Oscorp and all these other things? So the whole show would have been a completely different experience, and I just don't see how it could have been nearly as cool as what this show did. Having Norman Osborn, with great power comes great respect, is one of the greatest things that they could have written in this show. Like, that is such a Norman Osborn thing to say. I was like, this show is really effing good. It really gets it with some of these characters. So I was very happy about that. But man, I thought they did a great job all around with the characters, the animation, the action was really good. I like how they used like the comic panels which they don't use a lot. Actually, they use it like just enough to where it's still only utilized during like special moments, so it's not like, it might be every episode, but it's only like one time per episode. So I thought that was really cool. They don't overutilize the fact that it's like, hey, let's use comic book panels to kind of show the passage of time, or just show two characters looking at the same thing or experiencing the same thing. So I like the way they handled that. The way they do this alternate origin, of course, it starts off very different, and it's like, okay, so what's going on here? You have, and of course, by the time we get to the end, we realize it's not the multiverse, it's time travel, which was really crazy. But it kicks off with Doctor Strange coming in. We find out that Uncle Ben is already gone. Peter doesn't have the spider until after that. So, definitely some changes to the origin story. But the way it was handled was definitely cool. It was like, okay, so they got a multiverse thing. Doctor Strange was dealing with some Venom-based element, and then it comes in, boom, there's a spider. Spider gets Peter, and then boom, he becomes Spider-Man. That spider is also still out there, so they didn't tease on that at all for season 2, as far as like all the stuff they were kind of building up going towards the ending. I was like, okay, let's see what happens with that. And then they don't show the spider again, but that spider walked onto someone else's backpack, and then that person took off. And we haven't seen who that was yet, or how that's gonna kind of play into the story just yet. So I'm excited for them to kind of touch on that at least some point during season 2. I think that'll be very cool. So we'll just have to, wait and see what happens, of course. But I thought it was a nice little change of pace. And of course, there's so many insane elements where, obviously, like I said, it's not multiverse, it's time travel, but it's still MCU adjacent because they talk about the Sokovia Accords. And my big thing, and I didn't think of this until the end of the season, and the show's been renewed for seasons 2 and 3 already. Will they do the snap like they did in the MCU? Because they could do it exactly the same. And honestly, if they did, I think they would do exactly what they did in the MCU. All the main characters would be snapped, except you leave Tombstone. You give him those 5 years so that he can become like full-on Tombstone, where he grows up. Maybe his whole family was wiped out, and it's like, it's just him. No friends, no family. It's just, the gang members, of course. And then that's about it. So I think they could do it, and it would be very interesting if the end of season 2 was the snap, and then the beginning of season 3 was 5 years later, and they brought everybody back. That would be crazy. I don't know if they'll do it, but Captain America Civil War isn't that far from Endgame. And I just want to throw that out there. So I would love to know your thoughts on that one. But I was like, man, they touch a lot on a lot of the MCU stuff. Of course, the Sokovia Accords are like the number one thing that's been going on. They even referenced it at the very end, where Doc Ock, which was super funny, he was like, half the heroes have probably already, like betrayed these, accords or whatever, but I'm the one locked up in prison. So I thought that was funny, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. But I definitely love the way they handle all the different characters and how they kind of handle this MCU adjacent version of Spider-Man, and I think it's really good. I'm very excited to see where things go from here. It was cool to see Daredevil show up. Of course, Charlie Cox actually played him. I don't know if that means we'll see Kingpin. Once again, if they do some of the stuff adjacent to the MCU, if I'm not mistaken, Kingpin was there during the 5-year blip. So, that would be pretty cool. And we just kind of have to wait and see what happens with that as far as this show is concerned. But they did a fantastic job. Animation, action, introducing characters, which was very, very spectacular Spider-Man-like, where, he doesn't even meet Doc Ock. Like, we meet Doc Ock, but Spidey never does. He doesn't even remotely come in contact with Otto Octavius in any way, shape, or form. And I thought that was super cool. He hears about his name a bunch because of Norman, and that's it. He does not interact with Doc Ock, and I thought that was super cool. He meets Rhino before he's even Rhino, and that's like a spectacular Spider-Man thing, where he ran into like Shocker and Sandman when they were just common crooks. For like 2 episodes, I think they show up as just normal dudes, and then later they become Sandman and Shocker. So I thought that was really cool, and I was like, all right. And obviously with Lonnie Lincoln eventually becoming Tombstone, that's like the main thing, where he's almost the other side of the coin. And I love that element, and that's what made me realize, I was like, oh, this is definitely gonna end up getting to that spectacular Spider-Man kind of storytelling moment, where when they officially decide to do like the full turn, it's gonna be very interesting to watch. And I thought they did a really good job, because it was like, okay, he's clearly joined the gang by the end, but he's not full on Tombstone. Like, he got the powers, and you see like at the end where he's like, he crushes the brick in his hand, but you can see like it's just starting with his fingertips, is like just bits of chalk is what it looks like. And so eventually his skin tone is going to change, and I'm like, oh, it's going to be good. I'm very excited to see how that ends up panning out. But that's definitely the element where I'm like, okay, That's the number one element. They are all the other stuff still works as well. Like the Doc Ock stuff was great, and Spider-Man doesn't even encounter him. Scorpion being what I honestly at this point we have to say Scorpion was like the main villain of the season when you really think about it. That was amazing. That I love that, absolutely. Like I miss Scorpion being important to Spider-Man, at least as far as outside of comics. It's been a minute since I've read any of the actual comics, but there's nothing I can think of recently that he's really done, even comic-wise. But back in the day, this is going back to the 90s Spider-Man, Scorpion was like one of the main dudes. Not only was he in the intro, but he was like all over the place. The Spider-Man, the old Spider-Man game on PS1, you got to get to J. Jonah Jameson before Scorpion kills him, and you fight Scorpion. Even in the Sam Raimi video game, they threw like 100 million extra things that weren't in the movie. Even Vulture was in the game, but Scorpion was in that game too. And so Scorpion, I felt like, was a huge part, for me at least, of the Spider-Man mythos. And I'm like, man, he just really hasn't gotten his due in a very long time, especially, once again, outside of comics. And even in games, I mean, he was in the 2018 game, but, if you play Spider-Man 2, I don't think he's coming back. I don't think anybody is, which kind of sucks about that. But I always liked Scorpion. I always thought he had a really cool role to play. And it was, he's in Scorpion. It's just interesting. He was in Into the Spider-Verse, so that was cool too. But I was like, all right, Matt Gargan is like the big bad villain. And of course, he deals with both Spider-Man as well as, Lonnie's timeline as well, or storyline, I should say, where he's a part of the other gang that's rivaling against Lonnie, and then that actually ends up allowing Lonnie to take over as Tombstone, because the dude's, his name was Donovan, but Donnie, from Donnie to Lonnie, and that dude takes off, and I'm curious how they're going to handle that, because I assume he has to show up at some point in season 2 where he's going to try to fight Tombstone and then be like, hey, I want my gang back. And it's like, you took off on us. Like, you bolted and I took over. And also, I got superpowers now. So if they try to fight, I think it's clear who's going to win that situation. But I think he's going to come back in some way, shape, or form. He's not just going to disappear forever. So I'm curious to see how that ends up playing out. And of course, the gang build up and all that stuff. But it was nice to see Scorpion. Also, Scorpion was just insanely deadly in this. Like, they did a good job with him. It wasn't just the fact that Scorpion came back. Scorpion came back and he was effing scary. Like, he came in and was like, all right, I got this, Scorpion suit from Doc Ock. They found out where Lonnie's gang was at. They just burst in there and it's like, all right, I'm gonna just whoop on everybody. Just choking people, knocking people. I think he stabbed like one dude officially. He killed like the very first guy. And then that's when everybody was like, oh, it's serious now. And then he's just whooping on everybody, choking people, flipping people all over the place, stabbed the F out of Spider-Man. Like, he had to be saved by the Goblin Glider, which is a great first call to that one. I was like, oh, they're already doing that too. So that was really cool. I like seeing the different costumes. There were a bunch of different references and stuff. All the weird costumes that he had were actual, like, old school comic costumes. The pseudo Future Foundation thing, which, I think we all thought that was going to be the main outfit for the show, because that's what they showed off as like the special suit. And I was like, oh, I don't hate that. I thought it looked cool. I thought it was cool. It actually doesn't look as cool as the actual Future Foundation suit, personal opinion, but I thought it looked really good. I was like, okay, that's pretty nice. And then it was like, all right, he has that for like 2 episodes. He gets straight up ran through with a giant scorpion pincer. And then it's like, hey, Harry was there to help him out and was like, hey, I included some of your stuff from the sketches, because they kept showing it, and I was like, he's definitely going to do it. Maybe they'll do it for season 2, but they're like, nah, you get 2 episodes with the pseudo Future Foundation. Here you go, classic Spidey. So I was like, all right, that's actually kind of neat. I like the fact that they did that by the end, and I think the suit looks really good, especially with the way that they do the animation. It has like extra lines in it, but not in the way everyone's like, oh, the MCU has too many lines. The lines look good. It's the best way I can possibly describe it. But I thought the costume was sick, so I'm happy that they have the costume, and it still blends the classic Spidey with some of the newer stuff. Like, you can actually see the web shooters. He doesn't have like the kind of silver bracelets that he normally has, which they kind of got rid of those like a long time ago, I feel like, where he does like the actual bracelets on his arm. But I thought that was cool. I like the way they handled it. It'll be interesting to see how they go about doing alternate costumes for him in the future, because that's why I thought they were going to stick with the sort of Future Foundation suit, and then season 2 would be when it's like, hey, here's the official Spider-Man costume, even if it was like just these last 4 episodes he had it, or it was destroyed and then maybe we got like a glimpse of him in the actual costume. That's kind of how I thought it was going to be. And then season 2 would be like, here you go everybody, classic Spidey. But they're like, nope, 2 episodes of a special costume, and then the final 2 episodes classic Spidey. And I love the way they do the intro, where it's a different comic book cover for every single one, or at the very least it's just a different opening. Some of them are clearly references. They did like the Spider-Man No More thing when he had like his costume in the trash. Obviously the very first issue is like his first appearance, where it's him swinging, but he's holding Harry and saving his life. Love the way they did that for all the different openings. I thought that was really cool. So I love the fact that they did that. It'll be cool to see what they do, like I said, with the alternate costumes and stuff, and him like standing in the corner where it's like an actual old school comic book. I was like, man, that's amazing. Obviously the theme song, definitely, it's up there for sure. It's definitely one of the top theme songs. I think it's fair to say Spectacular's number 1. This might be number 2. It might be because it's lyrics, and the 1990 Spider-Man show, it's just them saying Spider-Man, radioactive Spider-Man. It sounds great. The guitar riff is insanely amazing. So I have to compare and contrast. But Spectacular is still number 1. Amazing, or the classic Spidey might still be my number 2, and then this would be number 3. But wouldn't have thought it would work, but it definitely does. I do not skip the theme song. I really love the theme song. It's like, it's classic Spidey Man, classic Spidey, and then throw some rap on it and change up the beat a little bit, and it's like, oh, I actually think it's really good. I was surprised at how much I actually enjoyed it. So love the music, love the characters, love the story writing, love the MCU adjacent situation that they're doing. So I think that's really cool. And also the end of the show revealing that Richard Parker is still alive is absolutely insane. And I thought I was crazy when he was talking. At first, of course, I thought it was Uncle Ben. I was like, oh, he's not dead, he's just in prison. And then it was actually Peter's dad. Absolutely crazy. And then I thought I was crazy. I'm like, I know some voices here and there. And then I see it in the credits. Josh Keaton is playing Peter Parker's dad, which is so cool. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with who Josh Keaton actually is, he is Spectacular Spider-Man. He was Peter Parker in Spectacular Spider-Man. He was also Peter Parker in, Shattered Dimensions? He was Ultimate Spider-Man, which I think was before he was even Spectacular Spider-Man. So, and he was also in the 2019 game. He was actually Shocker in that one. So Josh Keaton's been all over a bunch of Spider-Man stuff. Once again, thanks to how things played out in Spider-Man 2, I don't know if we'll see Josh Keaton again in the Spider-Man games, but Josh Keaton's been all over the place in Spider-Man, and it was super cool to hear his voice and be like, oh man, they got him to come back as Peter Parker's dad. Now, I'm still waiting. We'll see what happens when we get across the Spider-Verse. But as someone who's still a huge fan of the 1990 Spider-Man, Christopher Daniel Barnes, I want him to come back. He was also in Shattered Dimensions. He was Spider-Man Noir. I personally thought he should have been Amazing Spider-Man, because I'm like, hey, at that point, that was before Spectacular Spider-Man, so there had only been 3 Spider-Man cartoons. It was, or actually there had been 4 Spider-Man shows, because there was the classic 60s show, there was, the 90s show, then there was like the 2002 Spider-Man show, and then, was it Ultimate Spider-Man? No, not Ultimate. I forgot what the show was, but it was when he went to space. It was technically the sequel, but it wasn't. It was Reno Romano. It was also back. There's a bunch of weird voice actor connections. Point is, Christopher Daniel Barnes, I want him to come back. I don't know if he's going to be in Across the Spider-Verse. He better be. They better get him if they even make that effing movie now. But I hope he shows up somewhere in this as well, because I haven't heard his voice pop up in like any modern Spider-Man stuff, and he's like the 90s Spider-Man voice of Spider-Man. So I hope he comes back in some way, shape, or form. It would have been sick if he actually played Peter's dad. But if it's not him, Josh Keaton is definitely my number 2. Where it's like, if you're going to get Spider-Man voice actors, it's got to be one of those 2. No hate to Reno Romano or Neil Patrick Harris, who was in the 2002 Spider-Man show on MTV, which is also why he was in Shattered Dimensions as Amazing Spider-Man. For anyone that didn't know that, that's why Neil Patrick Harris was Amazing Spider-Man. He was actually Spider-Man in that 2002 show. But yeah, those are the voice actors. And also, of course, not Josh Peck. Drake Bell. There it is. Drake Bell from Ultimate Spider-Man. And I have no idea who the voice actor is in like the most recent Spider-Man show, where they put like 100 million things in the first season. I didn't even watch that show. But Josh Keaton is Peter Parker's dad, and Peter Parker's dad is effing alive. I don't know what that means for this show, but I'm gonna throw this out there. Another random thing. And this is in comics. Peter Parker's dad and his mom, both his parents actually, were agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They were spies. So I don't know if that will come into play in any way, shape, or form, or if they'll stick, go away from that or stick with it. But both his parents were spies for S.H.I.E.L.D. I just feel like with him being alive, it's like the only time that they could possibly talk about that, because there's no other time where his parents are actually alive to even reference the fact that they used to work for Shield. And it's a newer thing in comics, relatively new, like how Harley Quinn is technically still new, like she's only a 20-year-old character, stuff like that, like new in quotations. But it hasn't been talked about in anything, as far as I'm concerned, outside of comics, or at least as far as I know. I shouldn't say as far as I'm concerned, but as far as I know, they haven't done that outside of comics at all. And I feel like this is definitely a way to touch on that, where it's like, oh, his parents were agents of Shield. They haven't talked about Shield at all, even though this is, once again, MCU adjacent, so this is post Shield, post Hydra stuff. So they haven't touched on that. They've mostly touched on like, oh, just the Avengers alone. They haven't referenced like the other elements that surround the Avengers just yet. So we'll see how that pans out as far as season 2 as well. But I'm very excited. Richard Parker is alive. He's played by Josh Keaton. They may or may not touch on the fact that his parents used to work for Shield. There's a lot of stuff there. So I'm very excited for whatever is going to happen in season 2 of this show. And also, they do, of course, at the very end, they finally officially reference the fact that Nico has like some sort of magical powers. If you've never seen The Runaways, it's a whole thing. Unfortunately, that show got canceled, even though I thought it was pretty good. I wish they didn't cancel that show. And that every time I think of that show being canceled, I always think of Cloak and Dagger being canceled, and that really upsets me because I love that show so much. And every time I see Marvel Rivals, I'm like, man, I wish Cloak and Dagger didn't get canceled so more people could see that show. Tragic. Absolutely tragic. They need to bring them into the MCU because that show was so effing good. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I think it's great. It's definitely up there. It's in the top 3 as far as I'm concerned. I do like Ultimate Spider-Man. They did a lot of good stuff in that. They did a ton of storylines. But I'm still going to choose, of course I'm going to choose Spectacular over Ultimate. And I would still choose the 90s show over Ultimate as well. And I think it's just the fourth wall breaking thing that they did, where they changed that up, and it became a staple where it's like, yeah, he does that, but it's weird that he does it. It's definitely a weird Deadpool thing, even though they do reference that at one point when Deadpool shows up, and I thought that was funny. But it's definitely a huge difference to a Spider-Man storyline where they didn't need to do that, and the show's silly enough. I don't know, it was an interesting thing, but they do a whole lot. Heck, they had Agent Venom. Miles Morales' first animated appearance was in Ultimate Spider-Man, played by Donald Glover. So they did some really great stuff in that show, but it does not compare to Spectacular Spider-Man, and I don't think it compares to this show. Even with one season, I don't think it compares. This show is so good, and I cannot wait for season 2. Once again, I don't know what we should expect as far as, how they end up putting the show out with the 10 episodes, or if they even do, just 10 again. But I would love it if it was like, hey, you're going to finish the whole amazing series in 1 month. I'll be totally fine with that. That'll be great. But I love this show. Love the animation. Love the characters. Love the designs for the characters. I actually think everybody looks really cool. The art style, I think, is great. I think Doc Ock might be my favorite design out of everybody because he looks so classic that it was genuinely like perfect. Like even the little where they have like the little sunbursts on his glasses all the time. I'm like, man, that's like perfect Doc Ock. Like it's insane how good that looks to me. So absolutely love that. But I'm excited to see other characters pop up. I want to see Shocker come in. I want to see Vulture and Electro. I thought for sure that the one scientist dude that's always angry was going to end up being Vulture, but he's actually somebody else in the comics. But there's a whole lot that they can do. They already got Daredevil plus one of his partners. So, there's just a whole lot there. I'm very excited to see how this goes. Maybe Punisher can show up in season 2. For anyone who doesn't know, Punisher actually first showed up in the Spider-Man comic trying to hunt Spider-Man down. So, yeah, they already got Daredevil. They can do Punisher if they want to. But they don't need to. They already got some good stuff going. We'll see what happens. But I'm very excited for season 2. We'll love to know your thoughts on all things Spider-Man, but definitely Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. What you guys think about how they kind of just handled the series in general. Of course, the big changes of how he got the spider and the way they have Norman take over that role, especially giving him the with great power comes great respect line way after he becomes Spider-Man. Such an amazing moment. And just the weird dichotomy of Norman being good versus Norman being bad, because we know the storyline. We know what Norman is supposed to become. But I think we're in the way that they're doing it, it's just like with Tombstone. They're in these early stages where it's like, well, these are just people trying to do what they do. Norman Osborn is a pretty harsh businessman. You know, he wants Spider-Man to be at the top of his game. He doesn't want him to pull his punches. It's very interesting where it's like he just wants more power, more, you know, more respect and all that good stuff. How does he transition? Because it's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen where it's just like eventually it's just gonna go down like it does in the comics, where it's like, all right, he knows his identity, but he's not gonna out him because it's like, no, I'm gonna beat you. I don't need to out you. I'm gonna do it myself. We're gonna get there at some point. I don't know when, but I'm excited to see how we do it. And of course, the whole space thing and the symbiote and all that stuff, I'm excited for that. More symbiote costume, I'm always for it. I'm curious to see how they do it. I hope they put the white patches on the back of his hand, because everybody skips over the white patches, and I just don't understand it. The white patches on the back of the hand, it's like essential. I just don't get it. He shoots the webs from the top. It's just different. It's just different. It hits different, and people just act like it doesn't matter. It does. It really does. So we'll see if they do that. If not, I'm sure it'll look amazing, but they need to bring back the white patches and have him shoot the web from the top of his hand. I'm just saying. Like, I missed that. That was like one of the coolest things in the universe. When that happened in the 90s show, it changed my life. I was like, he shoots from the top of his hand? He's got the little patches. It's sick. It just looks good. It just looks good. But, like I said, those are my thoughts on all things Spider-Man, especially your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So we'll love to know what you guys think about this version of the show. All the changes and stuff like that, and the character switch-ups, and just the pseudo MCU nature of it, and how everything has been rolled around. Also, shout out to the Watcher, just the random appearance. I love when they do that in the shows now, where it's like, boom, there's the Watcher, just because. So we'd love to know your thoughts on all things, I almost said spectacular Spider-Man, but your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Good, bad, what you guys want to see, what you don't want to see as well. I would love to know what you guys don't want them to do in this show. I don't think we should have to worry about any of the MCU stuff, because I think they kind of rushed it as far as, you know, like, hey, here's the stuff with Norman helping him out, and then it's like, all right, that doesn't work. He solved that by the end of the season. It's like, yeah, I can't work for your dad. And then, you know, Harry has his own company. Also, Amadeus Cho, very curious. You can't have him become the Hulk before you get the Hulk. So there's a lot there. Amadeus Cho is he has a specific name. Is, you know, it's something Hulk. I forgot what it is. But yeah, he's in there, so he's gonna be Hulk at some point, or they gotta at least reference it somehow. But we'll just have to wait and see. So please put your comments down in the comment section below, and of course, thanks for watching.